Hi, I am Alicia Martin, and I'm a nursing major, and I will be talking about the North Korean crisis, um, which is a big deal, especially now because the threat of a nuclear attack from North Korea is such a big deal. And in light of the events in Hawaii when they got the um, false alarm about incoming missiles and nuclear attack, it's a big deal with the safety of the American people and just overall the world. How it all began, it is thought to begin when the Korean War broke out, which occurred from 1950 to 1953. This is when North Korea began to develop a hatred and vengeance against the United States. This is because during the Korean War, America dropped a lot of explosives on North Korea. And this bombing and airstrikes on North Korea during the Korean War were viewed as the original sin of the United States against North Korea, and it is exhibited in its propaganda against the United States. The continued fear of the deadly United States military airstrikes helps North Korea government to portray Americans as the enemies of the country. And this can be seen in the propaganda. It's constantly, the propaganda and media, it's constantly saying how the United States is the enemy and how they're out to get everybody, and it just kind of fuels this hatred for the United States from the Korean people. So continued, historians believe the Korean War began when the North invaded the South, when it was led by the leader of the Kim family. And that's how we believe it started. But North Korea, with its propaganda and its great control, trying to mind control the people, it teaches its citizens something different. The North Korea teaches its citizens that the United States started the war, the Korean War, which led to many deaths and bombings, and which does cause fear in the people. And then they also, through this propaganda media, believe that only the Kim family can protect the country from the United States. That they're the supreme rulers, that they're the only people who can protect them from this terrible country of the United States, as what they teach their citizens. And this belief that only the Kim family can protect them leads to further hatred of the United States, and then this is continuously fueled by the propaganda and media led by the North Korea government. So it's a vicious cycle of just North Korea government brainwashing their citizens into believing that the United States is the enemy of all, and they are the reason why all these bad things are happening. And the country believes that nuclear weapons are necessary to protect North Korea from the United States. Because according to them, and through the propaganda and the media of the North Korea government, the United States are an enemy that ultimately must be destroyed, and that can really only be done through nuclear weapons. So, to get some history of what has occurred between the United States and North Korea, it kind of all started with the Non-Proliferation Treaty. This was in 1985. It's a landmark international treaty, and the objective is to 1. Prevent the spread of nuclear weapons and weapons technology, 2. To promote cooperation in the peaceful uses of nuclear energy, and 3. Further the goal of achieving nuclear disarmament and general and complete disarmament. Overall, 191 states and countries have joined the treaty. This was to protect, ultimately, the world from a nuclear war that could kill millions of people easily if the technology is used. So they originally signed this treaty and ultimately was there to protect the world. And then in 1994, North Korea announces its intent to withdraw from the treaty. They no longer want to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons and find peaceful uses for nuclear energy. They want to do their own thing with their nuclear energy and nuclear technology. Once the United States found out about this, they stepped in and signed the agreed framework. They signed this framework, and it was believed that, and historians believe that this framework ultimately slowed down North Korea's production of weapons because it called to cease operation and construction of nuclear reactors that were suspected to be part of a covert nuclear weapons program. And this was in exchange for 2 proliferation-resistant nuclear power reactors. So they had them ultimately shut down one that was a cover for production of nuclear weapons to actually have 2 reactors available to provide energy for the people. And without this framework, North Korea could have produced hundreds and hundreds of nuclear weapons by now if this framework was not signed. And that was in 1994. In 2002, United States President George W. Bush calls Iran, Iraq, and North Korea the axis of evil in his annual State of the Union address to Congress and the American people. He stated that North Korea has been operating a secret weapons program to develop these nuclear weapons to use against the United States and any other country that kind of opposes their views and views that the Kim family is not superior and just does not align with the views. And this actually violated the Non-Proliferation Treaty. That was in 2002. And then in 2003, in January to be specific, North Korea finally withdraws from the NPT, meaning that they're no longer restricted in weapon proliferation. They can do what they want, and they can produce these weapons in mass. And then in February, North Korea activated a nuclear reactor, and which means that they were now able to produce plutonium for nuclear weapons. This is a big deal because if you now have the materials to produce nuclear weapons and they're not restricted in the proliferation of these weapons, they can create a lot. And this is evident in April. North Korea actually declares that it is armed with nuclear weapons. So in a short amount of time, they were able to get a reactor up and working for the plutonium and make all these weapons that can be used against others and cause a lot of damage, not only to the United States, but anyone that does not agree with North Korean views. In 2005, North Korea states it would rejoin the treaty by giving up nuclear weapons and all existing nuclear programs. This was in exchange for energy assistance because obviously they needed something. They needed energy help from other people because they weren't being able to make it in the country themselves. And when they said they would rejoin it, inspections would again have to occur by the United Nations International Atomic Energy Agency. So this would also make sure that they're not producing any more weapons. They're not using nuclear energy to create these weapons and everything. In 2006, North Korea fires long-range missiles and claimed to have successfully tested its first nuclear weapon. So this is not okay. So the United Nations recognized this and then placed sanctions on North Korea because they did not approve of the long-range missile test. And this ultimately upset the North Korean government because of the sanctions put on them, and it kind of just made the United States look even worse to them in their eyes, even though it was the United Nations that placed the sanctions. And then 2008, North Korea closes its main reactor in exchange for another aid package because they need the help. So in order to get the help, they agreed to close it. And then they agreed to sign a deal to disable all weapons facilities, but the deadline passes and they don't actually sign it. So it didn't really work out. And then North Korea refuses free access to international inspectors to inspect nuclear sites. So these are free resources for the North Korean government, but they're refusing to do it because if they have somebody come in and inspect their nuclear sites, if they're making nuclear weapons in those sites, it could be found and they could get in trouble essentially, and then not be able to make them anymore. So 2017 to the present time. In January 2017, North Korea proposes to test an intercontinental missile. The U.S. Defense Secretary says they will strike down any missiles fired, and they also announced that new sea-based radars are available to detect any long-range missiles from North Korea. In July 2017, North Korea successfully launches its first intercontinental ballistic missile, and then North Korea continues to threaten to strike the U.S. Because the United States is again viewed as the enemy, and the North Korea people are programmed to hate the United States. So whenever there's a conflict, the United States is always in the wrong according to North Korea, and they're willing to strike them if it continues to happen. In August 2017, North Korea accuses the United States of trying to start a war on the Korean Peninsula again, because they believe that the Korean War was started by the United States, and they thought that they were going to start again because sanctions were being placed as repercussions from the ballistic missile launch. That the sanctions were placed by the United Nations again, but even though United Nations placed it, North Korea blamed the United States due to the programmed hatred for the United States. In September 2017, North Korea tests another nuclear missile that causes an earthquake, and North Korea reports that their missiles can be armed and they're stronger than the hydrogen bomb, which is a big deal and a big threat to the United States, and that's why they're willing to strike it down, any missile that comes, because if it did get to the United States, it could cause an immense amount of damage. And then in April 2018, North Korea made a promise to cease nuclear testing, including a closure of a nuclear site, ahead of a summit between North Korea and the United States. And then as of now, the United States government thinks ground invasion is the only way to eliminate the nuclear threat from North Korea. They would prefer diplomacy, but it may not be possible because the threat of a nuclear attack is greater than being able to sit down and talk about it, especially to keep the most amount of people safe possible. Overall, this is a very complex situation that requires cooperation from many countries for success, including China with economic pressure and South Korea with cooperation with the United States military. It's just it's a global issue because nuclear weapons can be launched at any time, and they can not go to the intended place and end up striking a different country or different place where it's supposed to. And it's really a global problem because as civil wars break out, such as in Syria, and the threat of using nuclear weapons is higher, and the United States has to be armed and ready for these. But ultimately, we should be working together to try to find a peaceful solution to dealing with these nuclear weapons. And these are the references I used for the PowerPoint.